minutes past 8. Mike will be here with the sport in about 20 minutes' time for you. Carol, of course, will have the weather as well.
Tougher sentences are being announced today for sex offenders, particularly if they're thought to have abused a position of power.
It's one of several changes to guidelines which put more emphasis on the victim. Jill Saywood knows just how important that is. She was raped in 1986 when a gang broke into her home. She's here with us now, along with Jessica Standley, who works for Slater Gordon, the firm representing many of Jimmy Savile's victims. Morning to you both. Thank you very much for coming to see us. So many changes to all of this, and particularly a focus on victims and the impact on victims. How much difference will that make, do you think?
I think it'll make a big difference to victims. So long we felt sort of left out of the system or surplus to requirement. So to actually see victims' needs and what's happened to victims put at the forefront of this will be really, really good. And
in your case, it would have made a big difference to you, would it, do you think?
I think it would have made a very big difference to me, certainly because I think that the comments made by the judge would have just not been possible, because he would have been made to see that actually the trauma suffered by victims often is very, very great. And not as he quoted.
Yes, I'm looking at the quote.
Could you remind us of some of, I mean, obviously for you they must sit still large in your mind, which is obviously evidence of why this is so important. What are the things that were said that still...
Well, he said that the trauma suffered by the victim was not so very great, and he took that opinion because I sat in the court for 2 to 2.5 hours on the day that the trial started. That I came from a Christian family, so I'd be all right in the end.
And that was said. That
wasn't said, but the trauma suffered by the victim was not so very great, were his actual words.
And in relation to the sentencing itself,
the sentencing itself was very low as well, and so they brought in the law of appeal against low convictions as a result of my case. So again, the not understanding the implications of the crime had a very big impact, because the men were sentenced to the same for buggery and rape and indecent assault as they were for aggravated burglary, and everybody said, you know, how can you equate the two? And to this day I don't really know how the judge ever decided that the two things were equatable.
So very difficult for you to talk about it, people to hear that as well, actually, and this is part of the point, isn't it, Jessica? How much difference is it going to make? You deal with lots of people who are going through the sort of legal system at the moment. How much difference is it going to make to people who've suffered?
I think it will make a huge difference. Victims need to have confidence in the criminal justice system. And I think the fact that the effect of the offence that has had on them or is having on them is really important. I'm really pleased to see there's more of a focus on the effect and the psychological effect on a victim, and not just the category of the offence.
And there's been specific reference made to the perpetrator in terms of whether the position they're in, if they're abusing a position of power or indeed celebrity, and of course you're involved in cases to do with Jimmy Savile.
Yeah.
So that's another change in emphasis, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I think that's really important, because abusers are often very manipulative. They're very clever in how they pick their victims. In the Savile case, we see he often preyed on sick people in hospital, those from troubled backgrounds, you know, young children, and I think it's really important that it's recognised when somebody uses their position of trust to gain the trust of a victim and then breaks it in the most horrendous way.
And one of the things that's so hard, Jill, and you talked about being in the court as well, do you think that the changes will help victims when they're having to go to court too?
I think having a better understanding always helps, and I think that when you feel that the courts actually have a better understanding of what it is that you've gone through, and the way that you present yourself, because everybody has a stereotypical view of how a victim should react, and that may or may not be true for that victim. So I think that a broader knowledge a more sense of what's actually going on. And I think that is much better, because it will help people to understand clearly that how a victim acts on that day may not be a true reflection of what's actually going on.
And I'm wary of the cliches that a lot of us say in relation to these things, but how much help will it be in terms of putting a dreadful experience in some kind of order in your own mind, that the judges, that the courts are taking more account of your feelings? Does that somehow make the whole as you look back on it, if you've been treated with, you know, more fairly, you think, by the court, or more reasonably, would that have helped you in the long term in terms of sort of putting things in order somehow?
I think it would help to make the experience less traumatic. People often say that they feel like they've been raped again going through the court process. And I think as well the fact that they're going to be looking more, hopefully, at the way offenders actually operate, and see that a lot of offenders actually have a pattern of how they carry out things. So, for instance, they'll go out, they'll buy you drinks, you'll get drunk, you'll feel, I can't report it, I was drunk, without actually having the knowledge that he was the one who got you into that state in the first place. So it's that sort of thing that is made very clear in the guidelines, that hopefully will help and take away the trauma of going to court.
And I think the guidelines make it very clear that victims shouldn't blame themselves, and often people say to me that they sort of feel guilty about what happened. So I think I really hope that the guidelines help with making victims feel a bit more at ease, that they're not to blame for what happened.
This is a good point. Jessica Stanley, Jill Saywood, thank you both. Thank you. Thanks as always for coming to see us. Thank you.
Time now is 18 minutes past 8.
Yes.